It's Wednesday, March the 4th, 2015. You're moving at the speed of creativity with Wesley and Shelley Fryer, narrowcasting from Oklahoma City on a snow and ice day that doesn't have much snow and ice yet. Well, hello, and welcome to a podcast that I've been wanting to do for some time, and thankfully, since we have this wonderful, unexpected day of no school, we've got an opportunity to record and reflect. So we're actually using an app that we're going to talk a little bit about today called Voice Record Pro, which is a free iPad app, and the beautiful thing about it is you can directly export your audio recordings to a video file that saves on the photo roll, and you can even publish to YouTube. So as I have continued to search for efficient and relatively minimal click or touch ways to produce radio shows, this is now my favorite app on the iPad and the iPhone for producing radio shows. How are you doing today, Shelley?
I'm doing great. Thank you for asking, Wesley.
And where did we plan this wonderful radio show today?
We went to the coffee shop, Cuppies of Joe in Oklahoma City, but Wes decided it was too loud for us to broadcast there, so we had to come home to make this podcast.
That's right. So I've not published a ton of podcasts on this channel, and there are so many things that we sort of end up talking about on a daily basis, especially that Shelley shares that she's doing in her iPad one-to-one classroom. And so our plan today is to talk about recent projects that she's been doing in her classroom, talk a little bit about some lessons learned from a iPad workshop for teachers that we co-taught together or co-facilitated last week on Thursday. Last night we went to Joy Hofmeister's Open Education Forum that was sponsored by Oklahoma Watch, and so we're going to talk a little bit about that, and then lastly a little bit about Makerspaces, because I'm continuing to have a maker studio in my classroom, and Shelley's doing awesome Maker Ed stuff with her kids, and we're both dreaming about how our Makerspaces could grow in the weeks and months ahead. So, Shelley, for people who don't know, tell us a little bit about yourself and your teaching situation.
I feel like I do this on every one of our podcasts, Wes, so I'm sure they know.
Well, people may not know.
My name is Shelley Fryer. I teach in a 3rd and 4th grade classroom. We've been one-to-one for a little more than a year.
With iPads?
With iPads. Our school, we're a very small, nonprofit private school. We service currently about 50 students who are homeless. We're a community resource. We provide counseling support, housing support, social community support, parent education, as well as a K through 5 school.
Okay. And I am a 4th and 5th grade STEM teacher at Independence Elementary in Yukon, and this is my second year of being back in the classroom, and we just finished a catapult unit, and we are in the midst of hopscotch and doing coding, and the first thing we've got on our agenda is to talk a little bit about recent classroom projects. So tell us a little bit about your Black History Month projects. You guys just did some Harriet Tubman poetry projects?
Mm-hmm. Yes, we were just starting a poetry unit. We finished some Black History biography projects using Book Creator app last month, and then now we're going to start on a poetry project, and we kind of kicked it all off with some Harriet Tubman poems that we used Voice Recorder app to attach to a freedom quilt that we built as a accumulation of our fraction unit. So we've been pretty busy, and I'm looking forward to this poetry unit.
This is going to be kind of low tech or not super fancy as far as editing, but I'm going to go to your website, to your YouTube channel, and maybe just play one of these. If you all want to do that, we'll include this in the podcast show notes. But Shelley's home base website for a classroom is classroom.shelleyfryer.com. I'm just clicking the link there to go to YouTube. And this is just a 45-second recording. So before I play it, this is, I think, a collection of 3 poems. Why would you do poetry when high-stakes testing is all the rage and everyone is just saying testing, testing, testing? Why?
Well,
why
actually,
poems?
poetry is covered on the testing schedule. I mean, there are a certain amount of things that they need to know using poetry, so it's not like it's too far-fetched.
Well, no, and I'm not trying to be actually serious about saying we should just focus on test preparation. Why was this a valuable activity, and why do you think your kids enjoyed it, and why did you decide to do this as a lesson?
Well, I mean, definitely by having them read different examples of poetry, it just gives them a different kind and type of fluency. Poetry is something that everybody can write and be successful. It has a lot of literary elements in it that we can highlight and use. Also, I believe Black History Poetry Month is coming up, so I'm going to be able to tie in a continuation into our Black history. So
connected a lot of dots. It was several
connected
things.
a lot of dots, absolutely. And then when we were reading our poems out loud, there's a great website called Poetry for Kids. It's a site by Ken Nesbitt, and I've gotten a lot of neat ideas and about lessons, and so I'm using that. So there's a lot of different things that I can tie in with the themes that we've been discussing.
We'll listen to this, and then you can maybe talk a little bit about the A+, creativity side, because you guys did freedom quilts that went with this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So people won't see that, but we'll include the link to this little short compilation, and then we'll have you talk a little bit about how you actually did this, how you guys created it.
Minty escaped from slavery. She came back, helped her family and others to the Underground Railroad by Brandon.
Her nickname was Minty, born into slavery in Dorchester, Maryland. She saved her family to give them freedom, traveling at night and using the Underground Railroad.
Harriet Tubman, born into slavery at the age of 12, escaped to freedom by using the Underground Railroad.
Okay, can you talk a little bit about the A+ side of this? And people may not know about A+ schools and all that kind of stuff. Because there's a creative side of this that is not just tied to the history and the poetry. It's tied into...
Well, it also ties into arts integration. Anytime we can attach meaningful learning to a multiple of learning themes, it just helps the children to synthesize that information so much better.
Other modalities of
right.
expressing and
right.
Seeing.
So during the course of our fraction unit, we had talked about, of course, different fractions, and we were able to tie in some lessons with Sarah's Freedom Quilt and the Patchwork Path, several books, and then talking about freedom quilts and the purpose of the freedom quilts, and talking about abolition and the Underground Railroad, and so we were able to make quilt squares using geometric shapes and colors, tying in our fraction unit with our Black History unit with our arts and creativity.
And those were paper-based, right, that
yes.
you guys made? And
yeah.
then you photographed them, or the kids photographed them.
Correct.
What's the value of the kids being able to audio record? You use the app Voice Recorder Pro that we're using for this radio show. Why is that valuable?
Well, the voice recorder it's quick, it's easy, we don't edit it. It also, when you're just using student voice and not their pictures, we don't have to be as careful with the privacy issues. We have a lot of our students who come from families, of domestic violence, and we cannot publish their pictures But what we can do is publish their student work using their first names and their voices only. So it allows those students to be able to share their work in a very safe way.
Okay. Now, you also did some biography research, and I think, did that take pretty much the month of February? You guys worked on that several weeks, so.
Yes, we did it the whole month of February, and then our school did a Black History Assembly at the end of February. Each student, this was our second research project, so we had done one earlier in the school year. But I used our home-based website to find links. Each student was able to choose an individual that they wanted to research, pulling from different areas of Black history. Some of them chose scientists, some of them chose women, some of them chose sports or music people, some of them chose historical, civil rights, or, Civil War personalities. So everybody chose their personality. I found websites and then placed those links on our home-based website that they could gather resources from. So they had to gather resources from a print book, from a video that they watched, and also a web resource. So they were collecting research from different areas. We used a tool on our computers called ReadWrite that allowed the students that had lower reading levels. It's a Chrome extension, actually.
And it's a text-to-speech, so it'll.
That's text-to-speech that allows for different websites to be read to them. I also was able to do a Google search where you can do a search by reading level. So I was able to find web pages that were on their reading level. It was really great. We talked a lot about bibliographies and why we needed different resources. We also talked about how to summarize information, because we wanted to, basically we didn't want to write a whole lot of things. We wanted to put it in our own words. And so we were able to talk about that. So at the same time, they were working on research skills. They were also locating pictures and learning how to copy pictures and save them to their photo roll. And we were able to use the Book Creator app, which is, it's so easy to use and allows for a lot of creativity. And the students were able to put in their own pictures and put in their own text and record their voices, and then save it to their iBooks.
And you made some playlists on YouTube of those, which was good. And I know you took one of our old Chromebooks from home, and I think used classroom computers for the read-write. How important was the iPad and having access to that digital tool for your students to be successful in this research? Could you have done this without those tools?
We could have done it. Across the hall, the teacher made posters, and they were gathering information and doing more of a traditional book report with that. So yes, you could. But I tell you, the level of engagement that the iPad makes available and the level of independence that it is, I have students that don't have any problem typing in information, but if I were to ask them to write that with their pencil using longhand, I would have not gotten near the quality that I received.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know exactly why that is. I think it's just they're so cued in to making mistakes and having it not look right. To write it down once is hard enough, but then once I would have had to edit that, help them edit it, and then put it in another readable form, that's just multi-layer step that is frustrating to them. Doing it this way, when we edited their books together on Book Creator, it's really easy to go in and fix it and talk about those edits and talk about why we need capital letters and why we need periods and how we can use a comma and bring in all of those writing skills in a form that if you take your pen, no matter if it's red, green, or blue, and start marking up their work that they've already created, it's somehow just to my students, it just feels like a failure. And then to get them to try to rewrite that.
So the digital somehow it becomes more naturally iterative.
Yes.
Like they're able to revise and go back and change, and they're not feeling like somebody's writing with a red pen on their forehead.
Exactly.
Okay, that's cool. Anything else as far as just recent projects? We'll talk a little bit about maker stuff, but you said your kids are living for maker time. What's up with that?
My kids love Maker Studio, and we almost always have a project going on. Of course, I think if you'll check our website, we just made our jitterbugs, where we're using a closed circuit with a power source and alligator clips and building jitterbugs. That was super exciting, and the kids had a great time with that.
Which are CDs that are decorated with all kinds of
using
pom-pom
small
balls
DC motors, and pulling in our artsy creative with our science, kind of a STEAM lesson, science, technology, engineering, art, and math.
An idea which came from last summer's Create, Make, and Learn in Vermont, and it's so fun to see your kids. So when you say they're living for maker time, why is that?
I think it's because it allows them some freedom of choice. It allows them to percolate. They've been percolating ideas of things they want to make. They enjoy the collaborativeness of it. They enjoy getting together with other students to work on a project. Each of them has favorite activities in the room, whether it's working with the Legos or working with the contraptions or working with the tinkering. We have electrical snap kits. It just allows them a freedom of choice of things that they don't have at home, that they don't have access to. So many of our students have not grown up with an abundance of toys. And so for them to have just free time to play with
to build,
to create, to make.
And imagination. Didn't you say like some of your girls were into the cardboard and the rooms they were making?
They have built cardboard houses all year long. And when they're not building cardboard houses, they're designing the people that go into it. Paper dolls, I guess, historically have been the dolls that people have used. My girls make paper dolls and clothes and families to fit into their houses that they're building, and it is something they are constantly working on. They've gotten their bus driver involved. Their bus driver Ms. White, our bus driver, has looked up videos on YouTube, and they share ideas, and Ms. White comes down and builds these houses with them, and it's been something that they've been able to...
Do they project their imagination into...
Oh, absolutely. It's play, it's imagination, it's dreaming, it's...
Dreaming of family and home.
Family and home and space and, mansions. I've learned that a mansion is anything that has over 5 rooms. If it has 5 rooms, then it's considered a mansion. If it's 2-story, then it's really, really fancy, So, just listening to their view of the world.
And is their language development when they're doing that important too, do you think? Like as far as when you listen into them talking or interacting, or is this solo stuff? Are they independent?
No, it's definitely collaboration. There's a whole, counselors would have a field day listening, and sometimes we have to stop because you get a real window into what their natural environment is by the way that they talk to each other and the way that the mothers order the children around and the way that the children talk back to their mothers. And you kind of get a window into their home life by doing that. And it gives me an opportunity when I hear things to say, stop, now wait a minute, how could we have said that in a different way? So... I guess it's play therapy. Counselors would call it play therapy.
But it's also trying to model and think and talk about social skills, I guess, interaction skills.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting is that right now, and if anybody has ever taught 3rd and 4th grade girls, the power of girl drama, because that's about now when it begins to start. And we have our fair share of girl drama in the classroom. But I'm always amazed that they can be arguing at recess or arguing in the lunchroom, but when they come into Maker Studio, somehow these same girls that have been arguing together are now making and building together. So, in having no problems doing that. So,
So somehow the maker time allows them to build a bridge and
absolutely
connect and collaborate. That's awesome. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about the iPad workshop for the teachers last week. This was our first time to ever co-teach an iPad
present
workshop.
together. Yeah, it was fun.
And we did it on behalf of Oklahoma A+ Schools, which is a network of schools focused on creativity and arts integration in Oklahoma, and there's folks in other states that are part of the A+ schools, and you're an A+ fellow. And so we jotted down a few different sort of lessons learned, I guess, about this. What was your overall takeaway from the day? We had about 5 or 6 teachers, both in the morning and then repeated in the afternoon, and the principal was with us both times, almost the whole time. But what were your overall takeaways from that experience? They've just received 10 iPads, and this is kind of their second real iPad workshop. And I think the first thing was more orientation; it wasn't hands-on. So, what did you think overall of the experience and what we did and the teachers did?
Well, I love being in Edmond, and I love seeing that some of their schools are beginning to get technology integrated into what they're learning and doing. It was really neat in some of the reflection forums to hear teachers say, oh, wow, okay, now I'm challenged to use these iPads in a way to enhance learning, not just as a alternative to a worksheet. And I think that's always the goal. Is too often we think if we just give them an iPad and let them practice their multiplication facts or something, yeah, the interest level is there. However, the real power in learning is when you're using that to make, create, to share, to amplify the students' work.
Yep. It was good to share the apps in advance. And in fact, if you want, we'll include this link too, but we put this on a website. It's a wiki, a Google site, that I've been using for the last 3 years for iPad media camps and other iPad-related training. And the website is wiki.ipadmediacamp.com. And over in the left sidebar, you can click the link for February 05 OK for Oklahoma. But we were able to share the handful of apps that we wanted them to use. Really, we didn't use all of them. We did iNigma to scan QR codes. We used the Voice Recorder Pro app to have them do a narrated photo or narrated art project. And I don't know, what else? Were there other apps that we really used? Those were...
Well, you use the photo roll and the camera and some of the InstaShare, some basic apps.
Share pictures.
I mean,
and transfer videos back and forth.
Knowing how to app smash is important.
Right, and just getting the teachers involved. You want to talk a little bit about the difference between the morning where we sort of launched into talking and then the afternoon where we did our little design project, and how you thought that went between the morning and the afternoon?
Well, I think it's definitely more beneficial when you have an actual project that you're working with. And it's always fun to watch teachers learn and do, be placed in a situation similar to what we do with children. I think you can definitely see the excitement, and we didn't do that with the earlier bunch. We had it planned, we just ended up doing more talking and sharing, and I think it's a lot more beneficial when you're actually doing something real.
It was a collaborative build project, and I did post about this on the stemseeds.org website, and I'll put that link in the show notes as well. It's a project that Shelley had done in an A+ workshop, talked about, and then Amy Leffelholtz, the other grade 4-5 STEM teacher in Yukon at Lakeview, had taken it, and then I had too, as it's kind of an engineering design project, but it's more of a collaborative building project. So the way we did it was, out of blocks of wood, we built a small structure that was hidden behind some partitions in the room. And then there were different roles that each person had that were named. And basically, some people could talk, some people couldn't, some people could only use one hand, some people couldn't build. But one person would come back, one person would get to see it, and then they'd come back and be able to have Legos to build it. But even with the teachers, my favorite part was seeing the differences in leadership and group dynamics and interaction as far as how the teachers talk to their groups. And, some were very directive and very controlling of sort of what their groups did, and others, one group was laying their Legos on the side and not snapping them together. It's just fascinating to see how people tackle that project and then how the interaction works. So, I don't know. It's a rich project because we were using it to say, here, document this with at least some pictures. And then we, went into the photo roll, and here's how you can, share a picture, and here's how you can record your voice to put that on there. So I definitely liked having that experience at the beginning. Not only did it get everybody up and doing something, and it was a project that they could do with their kids, but it also, rather than what we did in the morning, which was, well, find something you can talk about, go find a piece of student work on the hallway, or I don't know. It was good to just have an experience that people they did it together, and then they could create media about it.
Sure.
So, we had the classic question from one of the teachers in the afternoon. Do we each have to do one? Talking about recording. Would you have answered it the same way I did? Or would you let them get off and do it together?
No, I think it's definitely important for everybody to do a project, to do the activity, not just to watch. I mean, doing is so important.
Right.
So, and that's important for teachers to remember too. Yes, when I just had one iPad in the classroom, we were able to do a lot of projects, but I ended up doing the driving of the iPad. These projects are so much more meaningful when the students are creating the media. That's where the true learning comes in. And the students take to it so much easier. I have students that have never held an iPad, so I show them something to do one time and they've got it. Students take to it so much easier. They just don't have that fear factor built into it that most adults have.
So what did this workshop reveal to you about the challenges of cart management of iPads?
I think I use our iPads as, and I still have challenges going with that, as a digital portfolio. We have a collection of projects that are built in and saved on my individual iPads. Some of those I'm able to archive on our YouTube channel, but others I'm wondering at the end of the school year, what do I do with those? How would I pass those on to another teacher? How would I allow students to take those home with them at the end of the school year? And I do not have an answer for that yet. My students do not have places where they can go to access that.
You do have the kid blog. I mean, this is a fundamental question. Like, where do we share this stuff? Where do we house this stuff? I was listening, I told you that 2009 Flint, Michigan, teacher podcast about one-to-one with laptops. And they were talking about that with shared folders, but where, or floppy disks even, in printing, where do we share our stuff? Where do you turn it in? And we had that question, like some of the teachers were jumping to that right away when we talked about this, like, well, wait a minute, where are we going to share this? Where are we going to have it? So you've got a YouTube channel, you've got kid blog, your kids don't have Google accounts, so they don't have Google Drive.
We have books that we've created. I mean, we have...
YouTube and Kid Blog are pretty much where you archive stuff now, and the photo roll of the iPads, right?
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and their iBooks shelf. They have their iBooks that they've created.
On their iPad.
Sure, but it's on their iPad.
Here's a thought that I just had, and Gail Lovely would be a good person to talk to about this, because she wants to help create this nonfiction, well, not just even nonfiction, just a library of fiction and nonfiction for young readers, but maybe, creating a digital library for your school where your kids could then share their books, but then they could be downloadable. Maybe that's something we need to build as a place for those books to go, right? And then for them, because if it's in their iBooks, that's great on their iPad, but they can't share it out of that. I mean, it's a dead end as far as publishing, so... I don't know. Maybe that's another piece.
Like an iBooks library for a
for your school.
For your school.
An iBooks library for your school, so that your kids, could publish their books. I mean, and they could be a video, which is great, but something about being a book and being able to flip through it. Because if we don't do it now, if you don't have a place to save it, it is just like putting it in the library.
There may be some kind of content management. When we were at Miami Device, I was talking to. Who had that? content management.
Was
Otis?
Yeah,
Was it Otis?
Maybe. I don't know.
I mean, I want to go re-look at some of that stuff. Some of these things that I see at conferences, I look at and I think it sounds great and it looks like just what I need, and I get back to school and I get busy with other things. So, there may be other content management tools out there that we haven't found yet.
Yep.
That might work.
Okay. Well, 2 more things we have on our list, and then we'll kind of wrap up. We've been going for half an hour. We're going to talk about Joy's Oklahoma Watch Forum. So, you were on social media yesterday, saw...
Yeah, I was on my news app, News Channel 4 app, and I saw that Joy was talking at Will Rogers, theater down in Western.
And Joy Hofmeister is our newly elected state superintendent for public education, and we have really just had interaction with her because of ed camps and because of her coming to ed camps. So we went, and it was an evening Q&A. What were your impressions?
I really like the way that she is informed and has worked very hard to get the pulse of teachers and parents and students in the state of Oklahoma. I feel like she is educating herself and using various resources to discover what's really going on with education. And I think she has a lot of things that I will be watching to see if they are followed through, as far as school funding, as far as resources for teachers, funding of preschool and early literacy programs.
Lots of questions about special education. There were a lot of teachers there asking questions, and I think
teacher retention.
Most of it surrounded or focused on teacher retention issues, teacher pay, funding, some teacher evaluation, testing. I thought she fielded a question really well that was about finance, and it dealt with tax incentives, because and I think the way she said it was, we leave millions of dollars on the table every year for education because of some tax incentives that we have, i.e. tax breaks, and that those need to be carefully reviewed. I felt like she talked very tactfully around that and on that subject. So it was also good for the networking. We met the principal from Harding Fine Arts.
Absolutely.
We met a teacher from
Cleveland Elementary.
Well, her kids went to Cleveland, but I think she teaches at another Oklahoma City.
Oh, she teaches at down the street from us.
Yeah.
Okay.
One of the downtown Oklahoma City schools, elementary. She's a special education teacher. So, you know what? It's great. Those face-to-face things. We're looking forward to Ed Camp OKC this weekend. Face-to-face opportunities to talk about education issues, and then to also network and meet people. So shout out to Oklahoma Watch. I'll include in the show notes a link to their site, and they did video record this and are going to be publishing it on their channel. Some of the comments I heard from people just were being very impressed, being much more optimistic, feeling real positive about the direction that we're headed as a state. And for those of you that aren't in Oklahoma, we've had a very dark age of 4 years of having an elected superintendent of public instruction who very much was on board with the Jeb Bush Chiefs for Change agenda, which is essentially discrediting public schools, championing charter schools, discrediting teachers, and really not supporting public education or public school teachers. And so it's wonderful that chapter is over, but there's so much work to do, and we are 48th in the nation in funding teachers. And one of the statistics Joy shared was that if you have a PhD and 25 years of teaching experience in Oklahoma, you can make more money after 3 years working at Chipotle on the low end of their pay ladder. And so her proposal is over 5 years to increase teacher pay. Is it $5,000?
$4,000.
$4,000 over 5 years. But as we've said, just a few blocks from literally where we're recording this podcast at our house, Upper Greystone Elementary had 21 certified teacher vacancies at the start of this year, and they still have not filled those positions. I mean, that is a fire. That is an emergency. And, sadly, for different reasons, I guess, we don't have the news media or parents or others amplifying those issues and then bringing the assistance and the support to those situations. So we all live in bubbles, and it's so important for us to be able to collaborate and to meet. And I learned a little more about that at our Oklahoma Google Summit, which was last weekend at Bishop McGinnis High School. No, 2 weekends ago, I guess, at Bishop McGinnis High School. And anyway, it was just great to get to network and visit and have lunch, with some Oklahoma City teachers and some of the members of their educational technology support team. So, any other thoughts about the forum from last night?
No, I think it was great. And I hope to see you at our Oklahoma Ed Camp this weekend.
Yeah, definitely. Well, let's wrap up by talking about makerspaces and dreams of the makerspace. So, if you had an unlimited budget, what would you do next year for your makerspace and for your maker time? What do you think your kids need and would benefit from in terms of a space and supplies?
I would really like to have a space that and work tables that would allow us to be able to spread out, to organize our recyclables, to store our supplies, something that, we would certainly want to keep it neat and picked up, but right now our makerspace has to be completely put away because, it's like in the middle of our classroom all the time. So it'd be nice to have work tables, organization, space, places for equipment, electricity available for, hot glue guns or soldering irons.
You guys took a field trip this week to the Science Museum in Oklahoma. Talk about that and what and we'll put a link. You posted to Flickr today, some photos. How did that inspire you thinking about your makerspace?
They have a really neat area. One of the exhibits is called their Tinkering Garage. And it's funny, but we had just finished up a unit in electricity and closed circuits and things, and that's what they had there that, we're allowing to tinker with and play with. And, I was just really impressed with the wide open spaces and the places that they had organized.
Recycling bins.
Scissors, glue, tape, all types of, and places where students could put their projects, completed projects.
Oh, really?
Right.
So they were showcasing student projects there?
Yeah, they had some student projects in a showcase.
Wonder if they're doing any of that digitally yet.
So it was neat.
Totally take a field trip there.
To have, all of those things available. The one difficult thing about the Science Museum, we were there all day thanks to a grant from BP, which was absolutely awesome, but the students, they just kind of breeze through the exhibits, and I would, it'd be nice to have a space like that dedicated and some time dedicated to just really dig in and work on some projects.
You said it was expensive to go to the Science Live show, but you saw afterwards how that impacted your kids as they blogged about it. Can you talk about that?
Well, I think anytime you do a field trip, it's an expensive thing. By the time we're fortunate we don't have to get a bus, and we're fortunate that we qualify for grants.
You have your own bus.
But, I think as far as prices go, I think they're reasonable prices, but it's certainly not anything that our families can afford, on a regular basis.
We don't as a family ourselves.
I don't even take my own children. Absolutely.
It's been years since we've been, but we've got to go back. What did you see, though, when your kids reflected on
But they love the Science Live program because, we do a lot of fun science and activities in our classroom, but I'm probably not going to work with liquid nitrogen. I'm probably not going to work on loud explosions and fire, So it allows them to see and experience some things that definitely they're not going to get in my science classroom, So it's awesome to go and experience. And everybody from kindergarten through the fifth graders, they know the things that it takes now to make an explosion and what that looks like and the chemistry behind that.
What's going to come from that?
So, that was exciting stuff.
And you said they blogged about it, and they reflect. You were able to see in the posts that they wrote, and did they share some pictures too? I mean,
no,
they made an impact on them.
Yeah, I mean, some of them we, of course, didn't take our iPads, and I had taken a few pictures, but nothing of the Science Live show. But so when we got back, they wanted to attach pictures. They wanted to talk about the big explosion, but they had to go into one of their drawing apps and actually draw that instead and illustrate that, which in itself was awesome, because too often we just attach a picture, but it was really neat to have them, draw a picture
a lot more processing
to add
that
to
goes
it.
into
Yeah,
their own artwork.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something you said you want to kind of work on, is you struggle a little bit with the app, knowing which one to draw, and that Brushes 3 you don't really like
I was not really impressed with the Brushes program. And plus, I haven't used it in a long time. Some of my students are a little more proficient at it. But, searching for the right brush tool and how to save the right,
We should get that Paper 53 app on yours, because
I do have it, actually.
They've evidently in the update given away a lot of the brushes. It used to be in-app purchases. And thanks to Julia Forsyth, shout out to her, sketchnoter extraordinaire from Niagara, Canada. She tweeted last week when she was sharing a Baptist preacher's sketch notes or something with me that, hey, I mentioned having a pencil anyway, which is the stylus, and that Paper 53 has now given away everything in their app. So if you're interested in more of that visual note-taking, sketchnoting stuff, it's good.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Getting kids to sketch.
Well, and it also requires time. I mean, that's another thing, that Maker Studio has become our time that we make and create with some of the tools, and it takes a long time to get proficient at some of these drawing apps or creating apps. It's not something you can do in a one lesson cycle. It just it takes time, and the kids enjoy that time when they get to choose what they want to make.
So, closing a little story without naming names. You told me a story, I think this past week, about one of your kids who had really struggled to be successful, and how in that research project.
I have a new student that came to me, I think maybe 3 weeks ago. He is an 11-year-old third grader. He was retained at second grade, retained again at third grade because he did not pass the third grade reading proficiency test. And basically because he never produced any kind of work. This is a student that he wouldn't take a test. He wouldn't write anything down. He wouldn't produce any kind of work.
And they said he was what? I don't know.
I mean, he's a great kid. He's smart.
But didn't he test how much higher on his reading level than...
Yeah, when we first get a student in, we have a series of just baseline tests that we get them to get an idea of what level. So on a test that they take on their iPad, he was scoring and, early fourth grade reading level, according to this test. And then when he began working in Book Creator, his project on Frederick Douglass was way better developed than some of the students that I have. And then when he went back to read that project, because he had to read it back and audio record his voice, definitely he has the reading and the comprehension. He got super excited. He loves history. He loves anything old. So he really connected with Frederick Douglass, at the end of this project. And it appealed to his artsy side. He's an artist. He loves to draw. So he was very particular about the way his pictures were placed in his book, what angle they were, how they were placed on the page. He spent a lot of time creating this book. And at the end of the project, and I reviewed it, I was like, yeah, this kid knows how to read. This kid is understanding what he reads. This student is producing, work. However, in a regular ed classroom, they were not, the teacher knew, because I happened to be a good friend of his former teacher, the teacher knew that the student was smart. However, what they were doing in the classroom, what they were doing in the regular ed under the constrictions that they had, he didn't fit into that box. And so now that he has a different way to learn, a different way to produce projects, he is really, and we're working on producing things on paper. We're working on writing things out, but we're not having to force it. And so it just, reiterated for me the importance of giving students a different way to learn, and I know in a different way to be successful.
Show what they understand.
And I know that we're not at the point in our educational system now where every student can have that, and that's unfortunate. But, going back to what Joy was saying, we have got to find different ways that the students are the most important thing in our state, and we have got to work hard for the students in our state because they deserve the very best.
Yeah.
And for this child, I am so glad that he found us in our school, and I am so proud of our
teacher,
school.
Right?
Well, I'm just so proud of our school for being willing to go the extra mile to work hard for this student population.
Yeah. Amen. All right. Well, if people want to connect with you, how could they find you online?
At S. Fryer
on Twitter
is my Twitter.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And that's probably the best way. And then sfryer@positivetomorrows.org is my email.
Yep. And every once in a while, you're blogging on shelleyfryer.com.
Occasionally.
All right. And you can find me on Twitter at wfryer, and my blog is speedofcreativity.org, where you're probably finding this unless you found it on YouTube. So, here, you have to say one more thing while I get our closing song or whatever thing. I think I can play Rachel's. I'm not gonna edit this, so.
One more thought?
Yeah, you got to share one more thought.
It's a cold, snowy day. Go and enjoy.
That's right.
Being at home. Connect with your family. Play with your kids.
Moving at the Speed of Creativity podcast are independently produced by Wesley Fryer and are licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution Only license. Learn more at www.speedofcreativity.org.